Welcome back to the Diary of a CMO, the podcast where I sit with CMOs and thought leaders in marketing and related media, tech, and creative industries. We'll talk about how they got to where they are, strategies and life lessons we can learn from them to help build a career, business, and ultimately a life that we love. I hope you enjoy. Please subscribe. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Diary of a CMO. As always, I'm excited to have my guest today. There's a bit of a backstory to this episode, but let's not get into it. We'll leave that conversation between myself and my guest. So I'm very, very excited to have my guest today. She's someone who I have on a few occasions when she was still within the African market as a primary assignment, even though she's elevated to a global level now. We'll talk about all those good stuff. I'd seen her work and I've seen people, I've spoken to people who have worked with her at different times and I've heard nothing but incredible things. I think one of the things I find very fascinating, which is what influenced these podcasts, is when, this global professionals, CMOs, marketing leaders, business leaders are actually really amazing human beings. And that's kind of one of the things I really like about my guest today. Today I have the global brands director, Desperados, Amstel, and Tiger brands with Heineken International. I hope I have that intro right. I'm sure she's gonna set me straight shortly. She's gonna set me straight shortly. And if you've been following conversations around these brands, you'll see quite a number of award-winning work. Like almost every other week, when I check out her profile, there's one win or the other across the brands that she's had the opportunity to work with or currently works with. It is my pleasure to introduce Natasha Maharaj.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining us. I am one of the things I do before we start to record is I try to get the pronunciation of the names right. In this case, I didn't even try. I was very confident, like I was going to nail this one. Even with your last name, no thanks to all of the Bollywood, content. My wife. Okay, I'm not going to cast my wife. Let's move forward. So, thank you very much, Natasha, for joining us. And I always like to kick things off by saying, if for those who are meeting you for the first time, how would you like to introduce yourself?
So I'd like to introduce myself as a mother. I have two amazing daughters, Senna and Sage, 8 and 5. I'd like to introduce myself as a supportive wife, and then obviously in terms of the show as the global brands director for Heineken. So I hope that is a good intro.
It is. I like it. It's sweet and sharp. Like it's not no fluff, and I appreciate that. Two girls. That caught my attention because I have two girls as well, twin girls actually, Kayla and Carla. And I'm not looking forward to when I have to start dealing with like the teenage years. I'm not looking forward to it. I probably will get some. Let's not get. No, okay, Tyler, calm down, calm down. But it's exciting. I'm just curious, like. It's not, especially because of the podcast. When people come on the podcast and I ask them to introduce themselves, it's not frequent that I have people start their introduction by saying I'm a mother. I think anything closest to this kind of introduction was Paul Jackson, who's the one of the co-founders at Boundless, an agency's XWPP Gray, and so on and so forth. And what he said was, when I asked him to introduce himself, he said, "I am African," and then he went into the other things. In your case, you started by saying you're a mother. What does that mean to you? Why is that important to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And by the way, I know Paul really well. We did a lot of great work in Savannah together.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think sometimes as a woman, especially as a working mother, you have all these different identities that you're juggling all the time. But I keep thinking in 20 years' time, what is the identity I'm going to be most proud of, or the one that I'll regret most if I didn't live up to it? And that's mother. And I think so that's my super, let's say, my most important superpower at this time. And so it starts with family, and then it starts with work and everything else. But that's my foundation and pillar.
Amazing, amazing. I really admire that. I really admire that, especially in a world where there are certain sentiments around women, identifying themselves first as a mother, and it's really refreshing to for someone at the height of your career, where you are right now, to still hold those values very strongly. I think it's really really it's really really exciting and amiable to see.
Yeah.
I think I should say thank you for that. Thank you.
No, but I do think it's a very topical conversation where women, especially in leadership positions, why is it that you have to be one thing? You're so many different identities, and I
Right.
think it's about whatever that lens is, being so comfortable and being so empowered and being so open to whatever brings you joy, and all of these things bring me joy. But the one where I most sit up at night worrying about is what's going to happen with my girls. How are they going to grow? Am I instilling the right values? And so that's top of mind for me right now.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much, Natasha. All right, let's take it up a notch. I'm looking at your profile. First off, really, really remarkable profile. I think that an episode of this podcast is not going to do justice to everything we could possibly talk about within your career and your journey and everything in between. But we'll try the best we can to cover some of those conversations. The first one I wanted to ask you, you've had this really amazing career, at least by my own, point of view. And I cannot help but ask, from Unilever to PepsiCo and everything else, all the way to where you are now at Heineken. When you look back on your career, what were some of the most pivotal moments in your career, that I think that you would say sort of influenced fundamentally how you think about brand building and leadership?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I've been really fortunate to work across quite a few of the big Fortune 500. The first starting company was Unilever. And for whoever's worked in Unilever or whoever knows Unilever knows that it's an excellent brand building company. And so that really, I think that first inflection point of working at Unilever and getting those brand building foundations was probably the best thing I could have had in my career. And I really learned the power of consumer insight, of strategy and discipline. And so I think in terms of Unilever, looking back, it's made me the marketeer that I am today and given me the discipline and the rigor that I look for when I'm looking at creative, effective work. So that was the starting point. Nestle was the next company I moved on into, very different in terms of culture. But what I learned from it was also super amazing in that commercial strategy acumen, but also because it's such a multinational company and so diverse in terms of its portfolio. I really learned about diversity in terms of leadership. So this commercial strategy with diverse leadership was really amazing anchoring of the marketing foundation and the brand foundation that I had through Unilever. So that was the second company. Third, I'd call out would be Distell actually, because Distell, in terms of managing a portfolio of African brands. So Distell, for those that don't know, was a local liquor company, quite big in terms of spirits, RTDs or ready to drinks, as well as wines. And so I was marketing director there for about 8 years. And during that time, we grew brands like Savannah, which is cider in the country, to the most iconic, one of the most iconic brands in the country. And it was really about how do you learn local context? How do you understand consumer insights and culture and pulse and combine that with commercial outcomes? So, how do you drive business results with consumer love and brand building in a very
Right.
cultural context? So, that
Right.
was, I think, one of my best MBAs that I could have had on the job. And then now in Heineken, which is an amazing international, global, well known company, it is about global strategy. It's about shifting from execution to big strategy setting and prioritization and global impact at a mega scale. And I think that's been such a amazing building blocks to each of my career ladders, as I call it. So
Wow.
I've been
Yeah.
very privileged in this journey. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing. I mean, the Unilever conversation, everyone who I've spoken to who has had a stint at Unilever always makes sure to talk about this. And I think one of the other companies that is mentioned as well is, I'm not sure it's Distell, there's another
PNG is usually
PNG, yeah, PNG, absolutely, yeah, yeah, yeah. When you talk to, I mean, there are CMOs who say that when they are trying to hire, and they look at the resume or the CV of the person, and they don't see any of these companies there, they kind of automatically start to zone out. I'm telling you, like it's incredible, and I think that's a big testament to to those companies and how they are able to really the level of impact they've had on marketing leadership, across the world and of course in Africa as well. Um, I cannot talk to you without talking about leadership, and I think especially as you move across regions, I would imagine that being responsible for a brand within a certain market and then to multiple markets and then almost at a global scale, you know as you made those transitions and you think about leadership, how do you think that your leadership approach has changed over time as your scope of work or job description changed? How do you think that your leadership approach has evolved, and what are some of those shifts in the mindset that you had to make?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So when you're starting off your career, it really is about me, myself, and I. And I think early in your career, and Unilever, I mean, they hire stars, so we could be stars among stars, and it really is about proving self. And so it's about focusing on outcomes and pace. I'm South African, so also very fast paced, and I dare say a bit transactional in terms of, yeah, everything's about how do I get to where I want to get to. Over time, I think my biggest aha, and especially the shifts internationally, the shifts in different types of roles, the shifts exposing me to people of so many different cultural contexts, is that empathy, real understanding, and being present is important leadership attributes that I think are super more valuable than I estimated in my early part of my career. And this creating trust and psychological safety and space, because when you're safe and when you have this trust, your ability, and especially in a marketing space, to create becomes boundless. And so, if you couple that obviously with championing commercial and cultural success, then you just have a recipe for success in terms of business. So, the biggest shift, if I had to summarize, was moving from me, myself, and I to this empowerer of teams of people. And if I use an analogy, it's moving from a captain steadying my own ship to a coach on a football pitch, really trying to drive everyone else to the goal and on
Wow.
myself, and a
Wow.
cheerleader at the same time. And I think that's brought me the most amount of just happiness, moving from
Wow.
being selfless or selfishly driven to, yeah, really worrying about the collective. And I love that.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. I think that's a very interesting leadership, concept in terms of your success as the leader is in the agency of the success of others. It's almost like, it's in serving others to succeed that you can then say that you have succeeded. Which is why when you see the brand winning an award in a specific market, that success, because they have succeeded, has now become your success
Absolutely.
in essence. I think that's definitely something to take note of. Speaking about leadership, I think a big part of it is decision making. One of the decisions I wanted to ask you about is when it comes to picking out what campaign do we want to roll out, especially when it involves across multiple geographies. I can't help but wonder what's your sort of a framework in terms of how you first determine, okay, this is the direction we will go, and in going in this direction, this is how it sort of unfolds across the different markets or the different region. Maybe not in great detail, but at least some kind of framework or principle that guides
Yeah.
that type of decision in terms of what campaign direction are we going in the case where you have to look after multiple markets.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the first thing is it a big strategy or vision? And that's the first thing, that's my first filter. And is it connected to the brand essence or the brand in the bottle, as we call it? So when I'm evaluating any campaign, any brand, any big platform, that's the first. Is it aligned and is it a big strategy? The second is in terms of the ability for it to live beyond 1 year. So, how sustainable is this
Okay.
idea, this big
Okay.
idea that usually an
Okay.
agency would pitch? So, is it aligned? Is it sustainable? Is it something that will continue to live back? And I won't look back in 5 years and think, oh my goodness, that was a bad move. And then the third is, can this really live in culture? And can it live omni-channel? Because days of traditional TV where a creative presents a script and okay, is this actually linked to the zeitgeist of whatever's happening at the moment, and is this in
Right.
culture? And is the
Right.
idea big enough to live on for 5 years with different campaigns or iterations of it? So those are the three sort of, let's say, freedom or frameworks that I use, and then we have freedom within platforms or
Interesting.
brands or campaigns over the different years.
So number one is that does it tie into the strategy or the big vision for the
Yes.
brand? Number two is that can it stand sort of the test of time? Can it transcend a
Exactly.
year? Can it transcend 2 years or whatever timeline we're looking at? And then the third one was what?
Oh, the third one is, can it live in culture,
Can
and
it live in
can it
culture?
transcend omni-channel?
Got it.
Is this able to infiltrate different contexts, different channels, and
Interesting.
spread? So that's
Interesting.
my test, especially with different campaign ideas that agencies pitch to us.
And I think the culture bit, I think it's very important. I think that would be my sort of like my favorite one because you are dealing with multiple cultures. Yeah. So it becomes really, really important that this idea is, flexible enough or has enough breadth to be able to accommodate whatever, whatever modifications we make as we go across multiple cultures. And I was having a similar conversation with I think the marketing director, Safaricom PLC, Zizwe, incredible human being. And she was talking about some of the in looking at Africa, and trying to figure out the ways they take the brand across all of these markets in a way that's meaningful to each of those markets. Speaking of culture, um, I think culture is one of those conversations that as marketers we're going to continue to have until whenever. It's always going to feature in every marketing conversation. Um, I want to ask you. You have obviously led a number of campaigns, that have not only just sold products or have commercial impact, but also sort of shaped culture in a way. I think one of the case studies I've seen is the Savannah one, and you mentioned that earlier. Your work that you did with Paul and the team. To also Desperados as well. I'm curious to ask you, when you think about building brands that are culturally relevant, beyond the business case or business
Mhm.
performance and all of that stuff, when you think about building brands that are culturally relevant, how do you approach that?
Yeah. Um, I think the first is being able to connect to a core human truth and really to delve quite deep into the inside, such that it's something that can resonate across multi countries, multi people. It's such a core human truth that it stands true for everyone. Um, so I think that's the first thing, and that's something I learned at Unilever is that if you really strike a core human truth, the ability for that to transcend, over culture, over countries is always possible. What I'm learning, especially now, and with Savannah and Desperados, as you mentioned, which is a flavored beer in Europe, is that culture moves even faster today with the fact that we have everything
Right.
digitized. And
Right.
so as marketeers, as humans, we need to listen even faster. And what I mean by that is how do we embed ourselves in cultural conversations and not just campaigns? So the days of campaigns are gone. And now we enter cultural conversations and going from one campaign a year to many cultural conversations that a brand enters and needs to be allowed to enter is now the shift. And so, what I mean by that is like Desperados, it's a creator led platform, meaning we give our brand to 60, 70 creators and we say, go and create, versus the traditional mechanism of taking a brief, giving it to an agency, pitching, coming back with ideas. We're actually asking nail technicians on Instagram and Hyperbeef platforms to develop what would Desperados look like for nails and music, and so it's changed quite a bit. I think, yeah. So for Desperados, it's definitely about communities. It's about building with authenticity. It's not about creating a campaign and then landing it in a channel. It's now about understanding what communities we want to belong to, and then creating that content for those communities. So it's quite different. Savannah is an amazing example because I think during COVID, the reason for the success of Savannah was it became so culturally relevant because it was a brand listening to the nation, listening to the need for humor in a moment where during COVID there was no humor, but finding it in a way that was so culturally relevant that it not only became a zeitgeist iconic in that time, but it also led to amazing commercial impact. And so, yeah, my big message is culture moves faster, listen faster, and co create with communities versus the days of traditional I'm the client, you're the creator, create on my behalf. It's changed fundamentally.
Man. Okay. So, I mean, I'm a marketing student, and I think I will be for a very long time to come. Um, I think there's a vain side of me who wants to be a billionaire, but I'm not sure that marketing is going to do that for me. But that's a different conversation. However, I love marketing, right? And I think that is one of those career paths that it's extremely important that you love what you do, because you have to connect with human beings. Like, and if that level of so-called love or whatever is not coming through, it most likely will fall flat. Why am I saying this? As I listen to you try to sort of break down, your response to the question, I absolutely love the concise nature of it, the sort of bullet point by bullet point nature of it, because it makes for very easy comprehension.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, okay, when I'm thinking about brand building, number one is the human truth element. Number two is to listen faster because culture is changing faster today. Number three is to figure out, okay, by virtue of listening faster, you can figure out ways to embed the brand in cultural conversations. Number
Exactly.
three, transition from one campaign to multiple cultural conversations through the
Exactly.
use of partnerships with creators like this, like the examples you gave about Savannah. For me, it's like it's this is nobody. You don't need a textbook anymore, right? Like, just just take this framework. Just take this framework. Just
You're such a good listener. You just taken everything and translated it. I think you and I make a good combo. So that's
I take that as a compliment. Thank you very much.
beautiful.
I mean, I absolutely love this. Thank you for that answer. It's very very concise. I wanted to transition still on the conversation about brands, and that intersects between brand and culture. It's the conversation about purpose, right? It's almost like someone said to me that, man, tired. Forget about it. Culture, purpose is now performative. It's almost like, it's now cool to say that you are purpose led as a brand, and it's why I wanted to ask someone like you who oversees is why I want to ask someone like you who oversees these huge brands is how do you evaluate whether a brand or maybe your brands are truly you know are truly that purpose is truly embedded in what the brand is doing. How do you ensure that? Because again, I mean, in, maybe not the best excuse, but you've got performance targets, commercial targets, you've got market expansion or whatever, you've got all this real business objective, if I may put it that way. How do you ensure that purpose still sits, if not at the center of what you're doing, but somewhere in what you're doing?
Yeah. So I think the first point is, uh, or the first thing I'd respond with is purpose is super important to me. But I'm also not happy when people try to just plaster purpose on, especially on brands.
You are the perfect
Well,
person to have this conversation
yeah,
with then.
we are a purposeful brand. And if you understand the industry that we're in, alcohol, you have to be even more careful, even more authentic in terms of purpose driven brands and communication. So I'm hypersensitive to it because one, my bullshit radar goes off. But two, in terms of, there's a responsibility as a brand builder, but also for the company. So for me, what I believe is that if a brand is purpose led, it must live in every touch point of the brand. And so can I say every single brand that I work on is purposeful? No. Are we trying to achieve that? Yes. In terms of purpose, it needs to be something that is deeply embedded in the DNA of that brand, and it can be like, I mean, I'll use the example of Savannah back in the day, which was how to bring humor to a nation, which you could say is that purpose driven. Yeah, people are not happy.
Yeah.
Humor brings a level of happiness, comfort, connection. The same with Heineken. They've spoken about bringing a socially connected world. People are spending more time than ever on phones. Bringing people together in bars just to have a chat and to connect again is quite an amazing purpose. But again, it needs to be so embedded in every single touch point that we as marketeers bring to consumers. And so I'd say for me, living purpose means living it in every touch point, living it authentically, or consumers will call bullshit. And so it's super important that you understand it, you're single minded about what you are and what you're not, and then you're consistent about it.
Consistency. Consistency.
And authenticity. Like, do what you say, be who you are. Don't try to, okay, today I'm Jaguar, the famous case, and then I'm something else, and people go, what are you, schizophrenic? So it really is about consistency. So,
You already sound ticked off.
yeah, it's purpose is such a big, important word. It needs to be
See,
treated with caution, I think.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Speaking to your point about being a category like the beer category, a cider category, um, it takes me to my next question: is how do you keep mature brands fresh and maintain relevance, especially with younger consumers who are just coming into that sort of drinking, eligibility age, if I put it that way. Because it's a especially with the kind of brands you're working on. These are global brands it almost, and I can mention a number of brands that I've seen struggle with this question, with this, in terms of being a mature brand in a mature category and trying to stay fresh and relevant as new segments of consumers emerge. I've seen brands like that struggle in the Nigerian market, as an example. Stouts struggle with this with the younger consumers. So that's why this question, I think, is really important for me, is that how, even as you are overseeing these big, mature brands in these mature categories, how do you keep, the brand fresh and maintain relevance even with new sort of, consumer segments emerging?
Yeah, it's a timeless question. Well, I think it goes back to, and I think about every time I've entered a brand, going back to the DNA of the brand. What is the archetype? What makes this brand tick? Where did it become famous for? And like a person, that truth, that DNA of the brand is so important to maintain and keep consistent regardless of whichever brand manager works on that brand. There's always a joke. I remember my managing director used to say, every time there's a packaging refresh, it means that there's a new brand manager on the job. But
Goodness.
but the truth is that DNA needs to be maintained, consistent, and kept as that golden thread through the years. Context changes, culture changes, and so the second point is about beyond the DNA, the core human truth. The truths at that time evolve, and it's if you always are latched onto that core human truth, you're able to express that in a new, fresh format. I'll use the example of Amstel, which is an amazing brand in more than 80 countries. And this brand was known for connecting and bonding. It was actually made by two friends, and that's how it was brewed. And
Interesting.
so the whole timeless connection has been about the authenticity of these two connecting over beer and their friendship. And during the years, and even right now, we've just created a campaign that's a global campaign for Brazil and for Romania and for South Africa and for other markets. And the core of it, the DNA is about this bonding and connection between friends. How it shows up is totally different from maybe 50 years ago. But that core human truth that more than ever you need these quality connections and people that really see you, people that really know you, and that's when you're the best version of yourself. That core human truth is still timeless, just
Yeah.
showing up in a very
Yeah.
different way today in this
Yeah.
world. And so I think, yeah, if you are able to find that DNA, find that timeless truth, make it show up in the freshest format of the culture and context today, then you continue to create authenticity and build communities because you find that magical point between legacy and DNA and relevance and novelty of today. And that's when magic happens. For me, when I've sat back and looked at a magical piece of work, you see the thread of that brand, and then you see just how you've taken that and created this new story with the old story. Yeah, it's just wonderful. So that
Wow.
that would be my answer to it.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much for this. Quick segue to this question would be, sometimes, companies like, Heineken, or maybe not Heineken, but, conglomerates who have sort of a household of brands. Sometimes I think it's called portfolio strategy, and then how do you, you're already smiling because you know where I'm going with this, right? So
So
so it's almost like when you approach product innovation that way, in terms of a portfolio, as product innovation as an outcome of a portfolio strategy,
mhm.
it suggests that, purpose and essence and DNA might be missing. But is there a way to still incorporate, these sort of this concepts of, essence and purpose and things like that? Is it still possible to incorporate them into, a brand that is clearly, or was born out of a portfolio strategy? Is it still possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of the starting point is again consumer insight needs. Where is there a gap in terms of meeting needs as a marketing company, consumer team? And then building on that, these demand spaces, spaces where consumer have a collective need. And so this the portfolio strategy emanates from these collective needs which needs to be met. And so products, innovations start to form into these portfolios to meet these needs, and they could be different demand spaces. So the starting point is always consumer. The starting point is always insights that are how do we serve a need for consumer, and then from there, as you build out the brand, you integrate the insight with the need, and then how the brand role and the essence of the brand might show up to help solve that need. So I actually feel like we are psychologists, we therapists for consumers, just
Right.
bringing products in a way.
Yeah.
But purpose obviously needs to be built into that, and how deeply you build purpose into the portfolio is a choice, like any marketing or portfolio strategy, but it is possible to live together.
Okay. Okay. All right. My final question on this section before I transition to the next section. For those wondering, I like to structure my questions in different sort of sections. Anyway, different conversation. But the final question for this section is, if you could, more of a, just a call it a sidebar. If you could erase one brand marketing trend from existence, Natasha, what would it be and why?
You already told me I got a bit feisty and a bit upset about it.
All right. Okay, 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 okay.
It's
Purpose.
but no, I love purpose. Oh my God, everything we do is purpose. I
You're
hate
right.
purpose washing.
Yeah.
Where people
Right.
just go put this on, oh, we've done purpose. Purpose is
All right.
about impact. Purpose is about following it through. Purpose is about consistency. And so I hate shallowness, and I hate like non-savvy brands that just go, we've done it, but there's no walk the talk. And so for me, if you're going to do purpose, do it properly, because otherwise it's purpose washing, and that I'd erase.
Purpose washing. Okay. I'll add that to my dictionary, my marketing dictionary. All right. That's cool stuff. Now I want to talk to you about more strategy, innovation type stuff. Alcohol is a highly regulated, competitive, fiercely competitive, if I might say.
So
How do you push for creative bravery while balancing compliance, responsibility, and commercial impact? It's a fiercely competitive, highly regulated category. So sometimes those two tensions can really start to determine what we are doing as brands in the category. So the question, therefore, is how do you push for creative bravery still while keeping these elements of, compliance, responsibility, and commercial goals in mind?
these are really smart MBA questions, hey? Friday afternoon, no, I like it. um, Yeah, so I think as I started saying, in the alcohol category, we're even more responsible and even more aware of what we say is to consumers is so important. So I think I'll start there. My belief, and I've seen it, is constraints fuel creativity. What do I mean? A tight brief makes a creative even tighter. Clarity in terms of where this is the framework and this is how far you can go makes it even tighter, because you know the space you need to create in, and it's amazing the creative potential it unleashes. In the alcohol space, we are more than just having or consuming alcohol. We're about immersive experience led campaigns, activations. So we're about experiences. And so I think it's super important in terms of this created space, how to make sure that in building a very clear, smart, clear brief, train brief, I'd even call it, we do so playing boldly and responsibly. And I think that's always such a amazing brief for creative, if I may say so myself, because it puts the boundaries in. And we've seen amazing work come out from, other even competitors, ourselves, Desperados. We have this fantastic creative idea which has come out where we've launched a music video on Spotify as our relaunch. And that came out of a few constraints, including budget. It's not just compliance, but budget as well. And so creativity is actually unlocked with more constraints, if I have to be honest. So I welcome it. And we also put it out boldly and we play boldly and responsibly.
Wow. Wow. Thank you for that. Speaking about Desperados and experiences, I think, that brand goes hand in hand with, these immersive experiences. It's almost very clear that it's a brand strategy for the brand. Um, I wanted to ask you about, you know, it's almost like a brand that's living on the edge. Like it's almost like if it went any further, it could completely go left. And if it doesn't go as far, it doesn't quite sit in the realm that the brand wants to sit in. So it's like being on the edge. You get what I mean?
I like
But
it. Yeah.
yeah, and I can't help but to ask myself, like, at what points do you determine that you want to take a creative risk? Is it just about, whether or not the brand represents that? Or sometimes maybe just based off the competitive landscape, and then you feel like there might be a need to do something that is, quote unquote, out of the box or out of the box.
Yeah.
In what moments do you determine to take, a creative risk?
Yeah, I may sound boring, but I'm going to say it because my one message at the end of it is consistency. So you can hold me to that,
No worries.
which is, it has to be consumer insight led. If it is something that is connected to what we're seeing in terms of needs and consumer insights, and if it's something that's super relevant and happening in culture and is a linking or has a linkage to the brand and the brand DNA, we go, why not? So that's the first question that I always think about. Is it insight led? Is it relevant for the brand? The second question is, because of the risk appetite, can we pilot it? Can we trial it? And then if it's not 100% right, could we iterate it? If it's not quite working, but we could take the kink out of it, versus should we need to put like 5 million euros down on something and we're not sure if it's going to bomb immediately. So that ability to be able to pilot, trial, rework it if we need to on the go in real time. And then the third question we ask ourselves is, will it create long-term brand equity? And is there risk ultimately for the brand? But is it just a short-term building tactic, or is it really going to build meaningful difference, salience for the brand in 5 years' time? Not always easy to answer, but yeah, when we did the music video, Desperados is a music led brand. It's built in terms of the essence is the beer with the Latin vibe. The insight is that consumers want to let go out of their head and use their heart and just get out and let loose. What better way than music? And a fusion of music is reggaeton. And so the whole idea was, okay, creatively, we're going to push the boundary. We're going to relaunch this entire brand using a reggaeton music video. We're not going to use a usual 30-second TV ad. We're going to ask a Latin American music producer to produce this entire repositioning. And you know what? If it doesn't work, we're going to be able to pilot, create, we could do 30 seconds of it, but actually, we're going to put it into culture and see how it goes. Do we believe it'll create long term brand equity? Yes, because the brand is built as a renegade, it's built as a pioneer. So we're going to test something and we think it's going to build meaningful difference for consumers in the long term. And that's how I think about risk, and that's how I evaluate it, especially for brands that are sitting on the edge like Desperados. How do we push it a bit more, but is it in line with our values?
Oh man, oh man. When I get like this, try to ignore me. I'm just too much of a. I'm just too much of a. I'm just too much of a fan of marketing and the work that we do. And so when I get into this really constructive conversations, I just get excited by them.
I'm really happy.
Just get excited by them. Oh boy. Um, consumer insight led, brand relevance,
Mhm.
long term brand equity, and then can we pilot and iterate?
Yeah. Well done. You and I definitely we flowing because I'm gonna definitely use you after this. You speak Natasha. I like it.
Oh boy, great stuff. I want to talk to you about shifts now, whether it's Gen Z or the economic volatility or tech disruption. Everything about marketing is changing pretty fast. And I can't help but to assume that there's definitely a number of things that we might need to unlearn, and then sort of relearn new things. What's one belief or best practice you think marketers need to unlearn to stay relevant in the next 5 years?
Um, it's a personal and a professional one for marketeers,
Interesting.
and that is control equals success. We need to unlearn that. Why do I say that? I'll use the example of co creation. Previously, when you went from one channel to many people, you had control of the brief, control of the narrative, control of the end product that went into any format of TV or digital. Now, with co creation and the way that marketing is going from influencers to curators, that brand is left to multiple creators to co create with you. And so you, as a marketeer, don't have control anymore. But that's okay because it still can be successful. And the biggest change for us is that we're no longer in control of the narrative. So today, marketing is about influence. It's about adaptability. It's about the ability to pilot and to iterate, but it's about mostly the ability to co-create and co-own the brand with consumers, and that's a massive shift. When I first started my marketing career in Unilever, yeah. So control uh, does not equal to success. You can still have success without control.
Oh my goodness. I need to talk to you again.
You're welcome.
I need to talk to you again.
You come to Amsterdam. We'll do it together. We can do it over
Oh my
drinks.
goodness.
Yes.
This is amazing. This is beautiful. This is beautiful. And it's so instructive. I think that's what I'm enjoying about this episode. And again, I always like to say that, when I'm these podcasts, I have a selfish motive. And it's that I want to have conversations that I would like to have, and only hope that someone out there, finds it useful and meaningful enough to want to listen. I hope that, by the time the podcast hits 1 million subscribers or 1 million listeners, I don't start, pandering to what, people want me to talk about. I really hope so, because that's the danger of growth with this space of podcasting. But
Absolutely.
in the time that it's just me, myself, and I, I'm going to keep it at that, which is why I'm really, really enjoying this. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you for making me feel so special in this. And you're also making me a bit shy. So thank you.
Oh my goodness. You don't have to be. You don't have to be. I always think about, one of the things I like to talk about when I talk about leadership and, innovation and building brands, I always think about, you know, cross functionality, when it comes to building agile cross functional teams.
Mm.
What have you found to be the most critical elements to getting the different teams to actually work in sync? I've asked agency leaders in the past, especially agencies that have a group proposition where there's a creative agency, there's a digital agency, PR, and then they come to the brand to say, we've got this group of agencies with this distributed expertise that we can bring together to really serve your brand. It always makes for a good slide during the pitch process. But I think that most of the time when rubber meets the road, that cohesion is most of the time missing. This is me asking you that same question, but from your perspective as a brand leader. How do you, what do you consider the most critical elements to getting your commercial, stakeholders, your creative stakeholders, your brand stake? What are the most critical elements to get these teams to actually work in sync?
Yeah. I guess the first thing is, do you believe in cross functional teams? And the answer is yes, I do. Why? Because diversity of thought, diversity of skills, diversity of just thinking just makes anything better. So that's my starting premise. So collaboration and diversity of teams coming together in a team of teams is amazing. What fosters and enables cross-functional teams? Because as you said, it's bullshit until it actually happens. What I've seen is the first is trust building. You can't be the best version of yourself and then let alone work in a unit or team without creating strong trust. And that means spending time on the relationship. I've learned a lot about that in the Netherlands. The Dutch are super relationship driven, and I've realized the difference between having a transactional, we work together to get shit done, versus actually building a relationship, which means like really caring about the other person. It's still work, but just caring enough to build a relationship beyond just the thing you're doing. And so I think that trust and relationship building is super important in any teams, agencies, other cross-functional teams environment. The second is this collaboration, which is what are we trying to achieve and what are the different expertise that each area is bringing. I'm bringing the marketing knowledge and input. You're bringing the production thinking, so really having a clear idea of what each party is bringing, why their expertise is so valuable in whatever project we're driving or campaign or whatever it is. And then really having that mutual respect, but also that roles and responsibilities clarity. Most of the times things go tipsy because people just don't know who's doing what, and that clear roles and accountability is not set at the start. And I've seen it happen multiple times. And I think the last is, once you've got the trust and once you've got this respect, collaboration, and roles accountability, who does what, it's about building this shared sense of KPIs. And it feels very blah and very boring and in the marketing world, but it's important. And it's the KPIs, which is the hard metrics, it's the business volumes, it's the revenue, but it's also the other metrics in terms of the brand love, meaningful difference. What are the things as a team we're collaborating on? And then there's the short and the long term goals. The thing that we don't put into the KPIs is to celebrate. That's the part that, when I think about performing
Interesting.
high performing teams
Interesting.
and high performing cross functional teams,
Interesting.
this ability to stop, pause, celebrate, reflect on what's happened, and go forward is amazing. I've had many mistakes. Last year, I had a project where I should have done it more. I really should have done it more, and I didn't. And so, again, this time as a team to reflect and celebrate and build, this the sense of positive reinforcement is super important in a collaboration team, cross-functional unit.
Wow. 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 I love the last bit of it, to celebrate. I love that. I don't think that, I think a number of people will find that really instructive, because I don't think, when I think about my sort of like my approach to these things, I'm not sure that I have celebrate on there, but I think it's definitely something that needs to be on sort of like that checklist as well. You have had the opportunity to lead, the region, for example, the African region,
Yeah.
especially with all of the distinct local nuances across the continent. Now at Heineken, um, you now lead a global brands with massive scale. You know, I'm curious to ask, how do you approach brand stewardship differently in each context? Or maybe I'm just assuming that there might be some, nuance or difference between both scope in terms of focusing on Africa as a region versus focusing on the world. What are the differences, or are there any differences in how you steward brands in each of those contexts?
Yeah, no, and it's just made me think quite a bit because at Distell, as much as there was an African footprint, again, Africa is not homogenous. Nigeria is totally different to South Africa, it's totally
Absolutely.
different to Mozambique. But there was more of a homogeneity than I guess if you had to go to Europe and Spain. But I think the key thing under Distal was that you understood I am South African. I understand the local nuance really well, and if
Right,
I
right,
was traveling through Africa, I made it my business to understand the consumer context as well as I could. At Heineken, you're operating in over 100 countries. So the ability to know every operating company is impossible. You won't know what the context of what's happening at every given minute. You'd have a good idea, but not the depth that you'd have in a local opco. And I guess the key thing is global scale matters. That's why, these global positions are so important because it's about how to take efficiency, execution, creativity, but scale it. So what I think the big tension point, but it's a good tension point, is how to take local execution that wins hearts. I think about Savannah, where you knew deeply the consumer, versus Desperados, where you can understand that consumer through the local operating companies, but scale it in a way that matters. And that comes to this core human truth that can travel. So there's a difference between the two. How I concretely empower opcos and with my global team is we call it freedom within a framework, and it's a terminology that we use a lot in Heineken, where we have distinctively this is what the brand in a bottle is, and you can't touch that because that's what the core essence and DNA of the brand is. However, how you bring that to life in terms of innovation or through your below the line assets could
right,
differ because of the market
right,
context. And so
right.
what we create is the set, these are fixed and this is flexible. And so we then imbue that with the local operating companies to be able to translate that into a local execution, still with a global presence. So again, this co-creation, which is my word for this podcast, we're co-creating with the opcos as well because we have the fixed, this is how we'd like to see the brand show up. We're deeply listening to consumer and customer insights through the local operating company, but we're translating that into a global premium brand that can work across every touch point. So the brand feels the same in every 100 opcos you go to.
Wow, wow. You just answered two questions in one. I had another question, but you've answered that question for me. In terms of how you sort of maintain global consistency, with certain level of creative freedom, especially when you want to win in local markets. And this your approach of freedom within a framework, I think is the way to go. I wanted to dial back to teams, and I think that it appears to me that you have had the opportunity to lead teams with very bold thinking and creative bravery. I can't help but to wonder, what do you do as a leader to create a team culture
Mm.
that's both creatively ambitious and commercially accountable? I think that there's a lot that people can learn from marketing leaders like you who have had the opportunity to lead a very broad spectrum of teams across different levels. So, having led bold thinking and creatively brave teams, what do you do as a leader to create a team culture that's both creatively ambitious and commercially accountable?
Just love your questions. They are so pointed.
Ah, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I've said this now during the podcast where to be able to create the best team environment, it starts with a very core human insight, which is psychological safety. Because you think about it as a human, as soon as you feel a level of psychological safety, I'm comfortable in the job I'm doing, I'm safe with the team, I feel trust, I feel that I can be who I want to be, I feel that I can function within this team environment. That's almost the baseline. So setting up this, you're trusted, you're respected, your feedback is valued, is like almost the baseline of I've learned to set in the team. It's come with lots of hard knocks, believe you me, lots of feedback. But I've seen this now over multiple teams that I've worked with, that you need to intentionally set that. And then once you have that baseline, I think it's about then, and you have the brand strategy super clear. So your linear brand strategy needs to be set, precise, clear. And for me, strategy needs to be so set and so clear and so structured that you have that as your Bible, and then you can ideate, and then you can be brave, because with the trust, the clarity of the strategy, the boldness emanates because you have the anchor points, and you can start to go broader and wilder, and always linking back to the commercial expectations. What is the revenue? So that's the accountability piece. Are we going to deliver with
Yeah.
these bold ideas? But to be bold,
Yeah.
to be creative, to be out there with the Desperados ideas and the Savannah ideas, you need teams that believe that they're safe and that they can challenge the norms. You need a clear strategy, knowing exactly where you're going to, and then you have the freedom to ideate fully with that clear goal of, okay, now this is what I'm trying to chase in terms of bold ambition numbers. So I've seen it work on Savannah. I've seen it work with the Desperados team. I'm seeing it work on the Amstel team. And it's definitely my recipe, my codified recipe of success in terms of how to unlock that for teams.
Wow. That's a strong word. If you say this is how you've codified your recipe for success, that's really, really, that's really strong. And I think like my favorite part of it is definitely that psychological safety. Because I think a lot of times it is it is this softer issues that really move the needle in terms of how we can get in terms of productivity. I think it is really the softer issues that really drive remarkably remarkably good levels of creativity. That's
Absolutely.
definitely my favorite piece. As we start to wind this up, this is supposed to be an hour. My hour is done now, so I'm going to try to round this up as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
You've been far too kind, Natasha. Thank you very much. I want to talk to you about two things: women in leadership, and also up and coming marketers. Maybe let's just say mid-level marketers. I want to ask you questions about those two as we start to round up. And of course, I have one question about raising my girls, but we get into that.
Yeah.
The one about women in leadership is simply beyond all of the buzzwords, because it's a cool thing to talk about, right? Women in leadership. It's a cool thing to talk about. And like we were saying about purpose earlier, is almost performative as well at some point. For you, you've broken grounds in an industry that I dare say historically dominated by male leadership. I dare say,
Yeah.
and I've seen some of the more dipstick research done by different bodies, and it's almost at this point a fact. So beyond this performative piece of talking about women in leadership, what do you think really moves the needle in unlocking more women into senior roles in marketing and commercial leadership? I want to talk about an experience that Cool Governor spoke to me about on the podcast. That's the Publicis Group, Africa
Yes.
CEO. She told me about an experience she had when she was coming up and how she had approached a woman who was in leadership in the organization she was at the time. She had approached the woman to be her sort of her mentor, and she literally was shut down by the woman in the most hurtful way, like literally almost saying things like, I can't remember verbatim now. She said something along the lines of, this woman said to her, I'm not I'm not into all these, almost like women supporting women, BS, if you get what I mean. Yeah, I'm telling you, I gasped the same way you just did when she was telling me, but that was her experience, right? It's in no way a blanket assessment of
Yeah.
this conversation. I just wanted to cite that particular incident. But what do you think really moves the needle in unlocking more women into senior roles in marketing and commercial leadership?
Yeah, I'm thinking about a very personal example. So,
Interesting.
when I was first offered my first marketing director role, I just found out I was pregnant with my first daughter. And at the time, I'm actually quite embarrassed to say, but I wanted to turn the role down because I thought, gosh, how am I going to do this? How am I going to be the marketing director of this big company, manage a new baby, which I have no idea how I'm going to manage all of the things that come with new motherhood. Also, as a wife and as a some all these different roles that I followed. And I remember at the time I told my parents-in-law about it, and I said I'm actually going to decline this role. And they said to me, "No ways. We will be your support system to be able to help you thrive, to help you travel, to help you, you know, um, be the best that you can be, because we will not allow you to choose or make a choice between ambition and family. You can have both." And it was such a profound thing. And I think about it all the time that if they didn't say that, I would have probably said, you know what, I'm going to step back, and this career and this journey that I've been on wouldn't have happened. And the biggest reason at the end that I think about it is because if I was not visible in the Distell positions or the PepsiCo marketing director roles or in roles like this, women like me, and my background is I came from a very humble family. I could dare even say we were poor. I grew up in a household where my dad had issues with drinking alcohol. So I was also always a bit worried about marketing in an alcohol environment. So I didn't come from a fancy background. I really had to build and grow everything I've have today. And for people, women, anyone, males, women, seeing someone like me who's come from a humble beginning into these global roles, really having to work hard for it, but also being able to balance being a mother and being a career woman, and being able to travel. And this is important because the more visible, the more role models there are, showing people that you can do it, you can be there, it is possible, I think is super important. And so for me, the biggest thing in terms of women leadership roles is visibility and telling the story very authentically, because my story was not an easy one, but it's a story that was enabled because I had the support structure of my family, of friends, of communities. That whole analogy that a child is not risen by a mother, it's you raise it by a village, is so true, because
Privilege,
I
yeah.
didn't have the support, my kids would, not see the mother in the light that they see her now. So hence why I started with the
Wow.
analogy of I'm a mom, because that's always been this balancing point, career woman or mom. I guess I'm both. And I'm more. I'm a brilliant human as you are. And the only way we can shine fully is by being able to have that support to shine fully.
Wow. Amazing. I love that statement by your parents to you. You don't have to make a choice between ambition and family
Yeah.
because you can have both.
Yeah.
And I think that's the message to every woman who's listening.
Yeah.
It's that, you can have both. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious. There's nothing wrong with being
Exactly.
chasing your dreams fiercely, while, having an incredible family as well. So I love this conversation. I love this conversation.
Absolutely.
And I can't help but to wonder, what would you say are the values that were responsible for bringing you this far?
Yeah, this is the deep session. This is the part where I'll go quite deep. Look, I think coming from a very humble beginning, you learn to work really hard. You know that you just not, it's not going to be handed on a plate to you. So you need to know your shit and you need to know, so, knowing your craft, learning the numbers, being super good. I think that was a starting point. I was really lucky to get into a company like Unilever. I no, they were lucky to have me as well. Now I know that, but at the time I was super happy to be learning the craft and learning all of that. And I think that's the first thing. But you know, there's a point where you know your stuff, you know your shit, and there's an element of just going, I am enough, I am good enough. I'm not the young striving female that came from a very poor background somewhere in South Africa during apartheid, where I was not recognized as a someone that should be in this type of position. I'm now an empowered woman, global leader that has the right to be here. I've earned it, I deserve it, I'm enough. And that imposter syndrome is something that I've had to struggle with quite a bit through my career, to be honest. But now I could say I've just hit 40, having two kids. I'm owning that. I'm owning the fact that I've had this hard, tough journey and it's made me who I am. In feeling that you're good enough, learning to speak up, because for a long time my voice was quite young girl. And also if you see me in person, I'm quite a tiny, petite. But it's about the quality of what you say. It's about the truths that you have to say. And it's about owning that voice and not being afraid of it in any room. So that's super important to me that I would share. Build your tribe. I've learned that I don't always fit in South Africa, in Stellenbosch. I was a unicorn. I've been a unicorn in many different types of environments I've been in, but it's okay. You will always have your tribe. As long as you have the centering, as long as you have the tribe, and as long as you have this purpose. For me, the purpose is service to others. I hate purpose washing, as I said, so I won't bullshit here. It really is that coach to captain or the captain to coach analogy of seeing others at their best. That's what drives me. So I think those are the things I would say to myself in summary is know your craft and learn it well. You're good enough and don't be afraid to speak up. Your voice is important.
Wow, man, thank you very much, Natasha. I could go on having this conversation, but I think I should let you go at this point. I have, exhausted, more than exhausted my 1 hour mark, and I'm super, super grateful to you for being so gracious. I do know that sometimes this vulnerable conversations are not the easiest to have, and I don't take it lightly
Thank you.
when people sort of peel back the curtain and share from that place. So I just wanted to say thank you very much. I am so happy for you that you are at a point where you don't need anyone to tell you any longer that you
Yeah.
are good enough. I mean, you are where you are today. You're good enough. You have what it takes, and you have no reason, as they say, to dim your proverbial light, if I put it that way. I think one of my favorite quotes is one that had to do with our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is not our light that scares us, and so on and so forth.
Oh, goosebumps. Yeah, the way you said it with your voice, I loved it. No, but thank you so much. Such a lovely and brilliant conversation, such great questions. And I
Thank you.
appreciate the time with me as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Thank you very much. I'll definitely be in touch because, this is every bit what I expected it to be and more. So I definitely be in touch because I think that there might be other things that you might find interesting that we're trying to do with the podcast. But thank you very much and enjoy. Have an amazing weekend. I wanted to ask you questions about the girls, but let's not get into it. Some other time when we do this again, we'll get into it. Thank you so much and enjoy your weekend.
Cheers.
For everyone who's listening to us, thank you for listening. It's been an incredible session with Natasha Maharaj, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. See you at work.